Manny Pacquiao is humiliated when he arrives in Mexico to fight Juan Dinamita Marquez, facing the most hostile reception of his entire career, being spat on, cursed at, threatened by angry Mexican fans who saw him as an enemy invading their sacred boxing territory, disrespected by Mexican media who questioned his credentials and called him overrated, mocked by Marquez's team who said he didn't belong in the same ring as a Mexican warrior, and subjected to psychological warfare designed to break his spirit before the fight even started. But what happened next shocked the entire boxing world, stunned millions of viewers globally, and proved that true champions aren't defined by how they're treated, but by how they respond to adversity. Stay tuned because this story will show you the ugliest side of nationalistic pride in boxing, the incredible mental strength required to perform under extreme pressure and hostility, the controversial ending that left everyone arguing for years, and the ultimate redemption that cemented Manny Pacquiao's legacy as one of the greatest fighters who ever lived regardless of what Mexican fans wanted to believe. The date was March 15, 2012, a Thursday afternoon, when Manny Pacquiao landed at Benito Juarez International Airport in Mexico City. He was arriving 5 days before his scheduled fight against Juan Manuel Marquez, the third meeting between these two legendary fighters after two previous bouts that were both controversial and closely contested. The first fight in 2004 had ended in a draw that many thought Pacquiao won. The second fight in 2008 had ended with Pacquiao winning by split decision. But again, many including Marquez and his fans believed Juan Manuel had done enough to win. So this third fight, scheduled for March 20, 2012 at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, was being billed as the definitive rubber match, the tiebreaker that would settle the rivalry once and for all. But Manny had decided to do something unconventional and, in retrospect, extremely risky from a psychological warfare standpoint. Instead of training exclusively in the Philippines or the United States as he usually did, he had agreed to spend the final week before the fight training in Mexico City at the legendary Romanza Gym in the Tepito neighborhood, one of the most iconic and sacred spaces in Mexican boxing culture. The decision was made partly as a publicity stunt to generate more interest in the fight, partly as a gesture of respect to Mexican boxing fans, and partly because Manny's trainer Freddie Roach thought that training at high altitude in Mexico City, which sits at 7,300 feet elevation, would provide some last-minute conditioning benefits similar to what Olympic athletes do when they train at altitude. But what Manny, Freddie, and the promotion team didn't fully anticipate was the level of hostility, anger, and outright hatred that would be directed at him from the moment he stepped off that plane. Mexican boxing fans, particularly those loyal to Marquez, viewed Manny's arrival not as a respectful gesture, but as an arrogant invasion, a Filipino interloper coming into their territory acting like he owned the place, disrespecting their hero Juan Manuel Marquez by suggesting he needed to train in Mexico to beat him. As Manny walked through the airport terminal with his small entourage, Freddie Roach, his assistant trainer Buboy Fernandez, his conditioning coach Alex Ariza, and two security personnel, they immediately noticed the hostile atmosphere. There were approximately 200 people gathered in the arrivals area, and while about 20 of them were holding Welcome Manny signs and Filipino flags, the vast majority were there to express their anger and contempt. They held signs in Spanish that translated to messages like, "Marquez will destroy you," "Go home, Filipino rat," "Mexico doesn't want you here," "You stole 2 fights, you won't steal a third," and "Dinamita will knock you out cold." The crowd began chanting aggressively as soon as they spotted Manny. The chant was rhythmic and menacing. "Marquez, Marquez, Marquez," followed by Fuera Pacquiao, which means, "Get out Pacquiao, get out Pacquiao." The volume was deafening, the hostility was palpable, and even the security personnel looked nervous about whether they could maintain safe passage through the crowd. Manny maintained his characteristic smile, waving politely to the crowd, trying to project friendliness and sportsmanship despite the aggressive reception. But as they made their way toward the exit, things escalated from verbal hostility to physical aggression. Several fans broke through the thin security barrier and got close enough to Manny to spit at him. One large droplet of saliva hit him directly on the shoulder of his jacket. Another fan threw a half-full cup of beer that splashed across his back. Another fan got close enough to shout directly in his face, inches away, screaming obscenities in Spanish that included racial slurs about Asians and Filipinos specifically. Freddie Roach, walking beside Manny, was furious. "This is bullshit," he yelled to the security team. "Where the hell is the proper security we were promised? Manny is a world champion, and he's being treated like a criminal." But the local security seemed either unwilling or unable to control the crowd effectively. Some of the security personnel even appeared sympathetic to the hostile fans, doing the bare minimum to create space without actually stopping the aggressive behavior. They finally made it to the waiting SUV outside the terminal, but even as they climbed in and closed the doors, fans surrounded the vehicle, pounding on the windows, rocking the car slightly, continuing to chant and curse. The driver had to inch forward slowly to avoid hitting anyone, while police on motorcycles finally arrived to create a path through the crowd. The entire experience from landing to leaving the airport took 45 minutes that felt like hours, and it set the tone for what would be the most hostile fight week of Manny Pacquiao's career. The drive from the airport to their hotel in the Polanco neighborhood took an hour through heavy Mexico City traffic. During the drive, Manny was mostly quiet, staring out the window at the sprawling city, processing what had just happened. Boo-Boy Fernandez, his longtime assistant and friend, tried to lighten the mood. "Boss, don't let them get to you. That's what they want. They want to make you angry, make you lose focus." Manny nodded, but didn't respond verbally. He was already thinking ahead, already strategizing not just for the fight, but for how to handle this week psychologically. When they arrived at the hotel, there was another hostile crowd waiting. Word had spread on social media about which hotel Manny was staying at, and approximately 300 fans had gathered outside the entrance. Hotel security and local police had established a perimeter, but the crowd was loud and aggressive, throwing objects toward the entrance, burning a Filipino flag in a trash can, and displaying banners with images of Marquez knocking out Pacquiao in violent and exaggerated artwork. Manny and his team were escorted through a side entrance to avoid the main crowd, but even inside the hotel, the atmosphere was tense. Several hotel staff members who were clearly Mexican boxing fans loyal to Marquez provided service that was cold and unwelcoming, borderline disrespectful. When Manny's team ordered room service that evening, the food arrived over 2 hours late and was cold. When they requested extra towels and basic amenities, there were long delays and miscommunications. It was clear that even within the hotel, they were not welcome. That first night in Mexico City, Manny couldn't sleep well. The combination of jet lag, altitude adjustment, and the psychological stress of the day's hostility kept him awake. He spent hours on the phone with his wife, Jinky, back in the Philippines, telling her about the reception he'd received. Jinky was worried and angry. "Maybe you should leave," she suggested. "Maybe you should go back to LA and train there for the remaining days. This environment is toxic." But Manny refused. "If I leave, they win," he said. "They want to drive me out, want to break my spirit. I'm not going to give them that satisfaction. I'm going to stay, I'm going to train here, and I'm going to beat Juan Manuel on Saturday. And then we'll see who has the last laugh." The next morning, Friday, March 16th, Manny and his team headed to Romanza Gym in Tepito for their first training session in Mexico. Tepito is one of the most famous and roughest neighborhoods in Mexico City, known for its street markets, its working-class pride, and its deep boxing tradition. Legends like Julio Cesar Chavez, Ricardo Lopez, and Juan Manuel Marquez himself had all trained at Romanza at various points in their careers. The gym was sacred ground for Mexican boxing, and the decision to allow a Filipino fighter to train there, especially one fighting against a beloved Mexican hero, was controversial within the local boxing community. When Manny's SUV pulled up outside the gym, there were already over 500 people gathered in the street. Some were there out of curiosity to see the great Manny Pacquiao in person, but the majority were there to intimidate, harass, and show their loyalty to Marquez. The crowd was even more aggressive than at the airport, probably because this was a neighborhood crowd, locals who felt proprietary about their turf and saw Manny's presence as a violation. As Manny stepped out of the vehicle, the crowd surged forward. Police formed a human chain to keep them back, but objects were thrown over the heads of police: eggs, tomatoes, bottles. One egg hit Manny directly in the chest, breaking and running down his white shirt. Another tomato splattered against his shoulder. He heard the worst insults in Spanish and broken English. "You're a cheater. You use steroids. Marquez is going to kill you. Go back to your third world country. We don't want your kind here. The gym entrance was only 30 feet from the SUV, but it took several minutes to walk that distance because of the density of the hostile crowd. Freddie Roach was hit with a plastic bottle. Alex Ariza was shoved by someone who broke through the police line. The scene was chaotic, dangerous, and completely unprecedented in modern boxing. High-profile fighters simply didn't face this level of physical hostility in the lead-up to fights. Trash talk was normal. Heated press conferences were normal. But actual physical aggression from crowds throwing objects and trying to assault fighters was extremely rare and completely unprofessional. Inside the gym, the atmosphere was initially better. The gym owner, an older Mexican man named Don Miguel, who had been a trainer for 40 years, greeted Manny respectfully and showed him around the facility. The gym itself was old-school authentic. Worn heavy bags hanging from chains, a regulation ring with faded canvas, speed bags mounted on swiveling platforms, jump rope area with a timer bell, weights section with rusty dumbbells, and walls covered with posters and photos of Mexican boxing legends spanning decades. But even inside the gym, Manny wasn't fully welcome. There were about 40 people training there that morning, a mix of amateur boxers, young professionals, trainers, and gym regulars, and almost all of them stopped their training when Manny entered, staring at him with expressions ranging from curiosity to contempt. A few nodded respectfully, acknowledging his status as a great fighter regardless of nationality, but most either ignored him completely or made their disapproval obvious through body language and muttered comments in Spanish. Manny began his workout with a warm-up routine. Stretching, shadow boxing, footwork drills. Freddie Roach set up the mitts, and they began working combinations, the familiar rhythm of punches hitting the padded targets echoing through the gym. And this is when something interesting happened. As the other boxers in the gym heard the speed and precision of Manny's punches, saw the fluidity of his footwork, witnessed the intensity and focus of his training, the atmosphere began to shift slightly. Boxers, even Mexican boxers fiercely loyal to their own, have a deep respect for skill and dedication when they see it up close. Several of the younger fighters stopped pretending not to watch and openly observed Manny's training. Some of the trainers stood against the wall with arms crossed, evaluating his technique critically but fairly. And after about 30 minutes, one of the veteran trainers, a gray-haired man named Coach Ramirez, approached Freddie Roach during a water break. "Your fighter is very good," he said in accented English. "Very fast hands, good movement. I understand now why he has won so many titles." Freddie nodded in appreciation. "He's the best fighter I've ever trained," Freddie replied. "And he's also a good man. All this hostility he's facing, he doesn't deserve it." Coach Ramirez shrugged. "Mexican fans are passionate. When we love our fighters, we love them completely. And when someone threatens our fighters, we respond. Nothing personal against Pacquiao as a man, but he's fighting our Juan Manuel, and we must support our own." The explanation was honest, and it captured the essential dynamic. This wasn't personal hatred of Manny as an individual, but rather intense nationalistic pride and protective instinct toward Marquez. Over the next hour, Manny completed his full training session. Mitt work, heavy bag, speed bag, shadow boxing, core exercises, cool-down stretches. By the end, even the most hostile people in the gym had developed a grudging respect, not necessarily liking him or rooting for him, but respecting his work ethic and skill. One young Mexican fighter, probably 19 or 20 years old, approached Manny as he was leaving and asked in broken English for an autograph. Manny smiled, signed the young man's glove and said, "Keep training hard. Maybe someday we see you as world champion too." But the exit from the gym back to the SUV was just as hostile as the entrance. The crowd outside had grown to over 1,000 people. Now that word had spread on social media that Pacquiao was training at Romanza. They had blocked the entire street, creating a massive traffic jam. Police reinforcements had arrived with riot gear, shields, and batons, forming a corridor from the gym door to the vehicle. But even with heavy police presence, objects continued to be thrown. More eggs, more bottles, firecrackers that exploded loudly and startled everyone, and even a bag of urine that someone threw from a second-story window that barely missed Manny but splashed near his feet. The Mexican media covering the training session captured all of this on camera. and the footage was broadcast that evening on Mexican sports networks, with commentary that was largely sympathetic to the angry fans rather than critical of their behavior. One commentator said, "This is what happens when you disrespect Mexican boxing by coming here and acting like you own the place." Pacquiao wanted attention. Well, he got it. Now let's see if he can handle the pressure. That evening, there was a scheduled press conference at a downtown Mexico City venue, a large hotel ballroom that could accommodate about 300 media members and fans. Manny's team debated whether they should skip it given the hostility, but ultimately decided that backing out would look weak and would be used against them in the narrative. So they showed up, knowing it would be difficult. The scene at the press conference was like nothing any veteran boxing journalist had witnessed before. The room was packed with approximately 400 people, far beyond capacity, creating a hot and claustrophobic atmosphere. Mexican flags were everywhere. Marquez jerseys and t-shirts dominated the crowd, and when Manny walked onto the stage, the booing was so loud and sustained that the moderator had to bang the microphone repeatedly and threatened to cancel the event to get the crowd to quiet down enough for the press conference to proceed. Juan Manuel Marquez was already seated on stage, looking calm and confident, enjoying the overwhelming support from the crowd. When the moderator introduced him, the applause and cheering lasted a full 2 minutes. When the moderator introduced Manny, the booing lasted just as long. Manny sat down, maintained his smile and waved politely, which only intensified the jeering. The questioning from Mexican journalists was aggressive and disrespectful from the start. The first question from a reporter representing a major Mexican sports network was, "Manny, many people believe you have been given favorable decisions by judges in your previous fights against Juan Manuel. Some people even suggest corruption or bias by American judges. How do you respond to these accusations that you are a product of favorable treatment rather than actual superiority?" Manny took a moment before responding, keeping his tone respectful despite the insulting nature of the question. "I respect Juan Manuel very much. He is a great fighter. Our 2 previous fights were very close. I believe I won both, but I understand he and his fans believe differently. That's okay. That's why we're having this 3rd fight, to settle it definitively. And I promise you whatever happens on Saturday, I will leave everything in the ring and may the best man win." The answer was gracious and sportsmanlike, but it didn't satisfy the hostile crowd. Another Mexican journalist asked, "But you didn't answer the question about corruption and favorable judging. Do you deny that you have received advantages from judges?" Manny's expression tightened slightly, showing his frustration, but he maintained composure. "I don't control judges. Control only my performance. I go in the ring, I fight my best, and I let the judges do their job. If people want to believe conspiracy theories, I can't stop them. But I know in my heart I won those fights fairly." Juan Manuel Marquez then interjected, speaking in Spanish, which was translated for the non-Spanish speakers in the room. "Manny, you say you won fairly, but everyone in Mexico knows the truth. Everyone who watches boxing objectively knows the truth. You were gifted decisions. And this time I'm not going to leave it to the judges. This time I'm going to knock you out so there's no controversy." The crowd erupted in cheers, chanting, "Marquez, Marquez, Marquez." Manny looked directly at Marquez and responded calmly, "Juan Manuel, I respect you, but you've been saying you'll knock me out for 8 years now. 2 fights you haven't done it. Talk is easy, fighting is hard. Let's see what happens Saturday." Another question came, this time from a younger reporter who seemed more interested in stirring controversy than getting actual information. "Manny, there are rumors, which your team denies, that you use performance-enhancing drugs. Marquez's team has requested extensive drug testing. Why are you afraid of testing if you have nothing to hide?" This question was a reference to the long-standing controversy in boxing about PED testing, specifically related to Floyd Mayweather's accusations and demands for Olympic-style drug testing before he would agree to fight Pacquiao. Manny's frustration was now visible. "I'm not afraid of testing. I have taken every test required by the Nevada Commission. I have passed every test. These accusations are insults, attempts to damage my reputation. I have nothing to hide. My power comes from God, from hard work, from dedication, not from drugs." The press conference continued in this hostile vein for another 45 minutes. Nearly every question from Mexican media was framed negatively or accusatorially. The few American journalists present tried to ask more balanced questions, but they were often shouted down by the crowd. At one point, a fan rushed the stage trying to get at Manny, and security had to tackle him and remove him from the venue. The incident caused a 10-minute disruption, while order was restored. When the press conference finally ended, Manny stood up to leave, and the crowd began pelting the stage with paper, plastic bottles, and wadded-up garbage. Security quickly surrounded Manny and his team and escorted them out through a back exit. In the SUV on the way back to the hotel, Freddie Roach was livid. "This is the most unprofessional, disgraceful bullshit I've ever seen in 40 years in boxing. These people are treating you like you're some kind of villain, some kind of evil person. You're one of the most respectful, humble champions in the sport. You don't trash talk, you don't act arrogant, you honor your opponents. And this is how they treat you?" Manny was quieter, more contemplative. "Freddie, it's okay. Let them boo. Let them throw things. Let them hate. It doesn't change who I am. It doesn't change my preparation. Saturday night I will speak with my fists. And that's the only language they will understand." How do you handle situations where you're disrespected, hated, or attacked by people who don't even know you personally, but judge you based on tribalism, nationalism, or loyalty to someone else? Have you ever been in an environment where you were the outsider, the enemy, the unwelcome presence? Share in the comments your experiences with handling hostility and staying focused on your goals despite external negativity, because Manny's mental strength in this situation is a masterclass in resilience. The following day, Saturday, March 17th, 3 days before the fight, was Media Day, where both fighters would be available for one-on-one interviews with various outlets. The event was held at the gym where Manny had been training, which meant another journey through hostile crowds, another gauntlet of insults and thrown objects, another test of patience and mental fortitude. This time, however, something different happened. A small group of Filipino immigrants living in Mexico City had organized and showed up to support Manny. There were about 50 of them, mostly OFWs, overseas Filipino workers, who worked as nurses, domestic helpers, engineers, and teachers in various parts of Mexico. They brought Philippine flags, they wore Pacquiao t-shirts, and they positioned themselves near the gym entrance, creating a small buffer of positive energy amid the sea of hostility. When Manny arrived and saw them, his face lit up with genuine happiness. He went directly to them, shaking hands, taking photos, hugging the elderly Filipinas who were crying with emotion at seeing their national hero in person. "Salamat po," he said to them in Tagalog, thanking them for coming. "Ang suporta ninyo ay nagbibigay sa akin ng lakas. Your support gives me strength." One elderly woman, probably in her 70s, grabbed his hand and said in Tagalog, "You make us proud. Every Filipino in the world is proud of you. Don't let these people break you. You are a champion, and you will always be our champion." The moment was captured by several cameras and photographers, and the images and videos were shared widely on Filipino social media, going viral within hours. For Filipinos around the world watching Manny be humiliated and attacked in Mexico, seeing this small group of kababayans, countrymen, supporting him in person, was deeply emotional and inspiring. Inside the gym during Media Day, Manny did dozens of back-to-back interviews with outlets from around the world: ESPN, HBO, Showtime, various Philippine networks, Asian sports channels, European broadcasters, and with each interview, he was asked about the hostile reception, the crowds, the disrespect. His answers were consistent, respectful toward Mexican fans and their passion, understanding of their loyalty to Marquez, but also firm in his belief that the hostility was excessive and crossed lines of sportsmanship. One American journalist from ESPN asked pointedly, "Manny, do you think this hostile environment has gotten into your head? Do you think it's affecting your preparation and your mental state going into Saturday?" Manny smiled, that characteristic humble smile, and answered thoughtfully, "Every fighter faces different challenges. Some fighters face trash talk from opponents. Some face media pressure. I'm facing hostile crowds and environment, but I have faced worse things in my life. I grew up in extreme poverty. I have been knocked down in fights and got back up. I have been counted out many times in my career and proved people wrong. This hostility, it's just noise. On Saturday night, there will be no crowd in the ring with me, just me and Juan Manuel. And in that moment, none of this matters. Only skill, heart, and will matter. The answer was perfect, showing neither weakness nor false bravado, just quiet confidence grounded in experience. The ESPN journalist nodded appreciatively and later wrote in his article, "Despite facing the most hostile fight week environment I've witnessed in 20 years covering boxing, Pacquiao remains focused, professional, and remarkably gracious. Whether he wins or loses Saturday, his conduct this week has been championship caliber." That evening, Manny received an unexpected phone call. It was from Oscar de la Hoya, the retired Mexican-American boxing legend who was now a promoter and who had promoted several of Manny's previous fights. Oscar had been watching the coverage from Mexico and was disturbed by what he saw. "Manny," Oscar said, "I'm calling to apologize on behalf of Mexican boxing fans. What's happening to you is not right. Yes, fans are passionate. Yes, they support their own fighters, but there are lines that shouldn't be crossed. You're being treated like a criminal when you're actually one of the greatest fighters of all time and one of the classiest champions in the sport. I just want you to know that many Mexican Americans, many people who respect boxing, are embarrassed by what's happening and support you." Manny was touched by the call. "Thank you, Oscar. That means a lot coming from you. I know Mexican fans love their fighters. I respect that. Just hope that after Saturday, whether I win or lose, they can respect me too as a fighter and as a person." Oscar replied, "They will, Manny. Once you get in that ring and show what you're made of, they'll respect you. Mexican boxing fans respect warriors. And you're a warrior. Just go out there and do what you do best." The next 2 days, Sunday and Monday, followed a similar pattern. Training sessions at the gym with hostile crowds outside, meals at the hotel with cold service and occasional mistakes with orders, restless sleep due to altitude and stress, and constant media scrutiny. But something was shifting inside Manny. The initial shock and hurt from the hostility was transforming into fuel, into motivation, into a burning determination to prove everyone wrong, to silence the critics not with words, but with performance. Freddie Roach noticed the change. "Boss is getting into that zone," he told Boo Boy and Alex during a private conversation. "That zone where everything disappears except the fight. I've seen it before in his career. When he gets like this, he's dangerous. He's focused like a laser." Tuesday, March 19th, the day before the fight, was weigh-in day. The official weigh-in was held at the MGM Grand Garden Arena in Las Vegas, where the fight would take place the following night. Manny and his team flew from Mexico City to Las Vegas that morning, relieved to finally be leaving the hostile environment of Mexico, but knowing that the weigh-in itself would be another test as thousands of Mexican and Mexican-American fans would be in attendance supporting Marquez. They arrived in Las Vegas around noon, checked into the MGM Grand Hotel, and had a few hours to rest before the weigh-in ceremony that afternoon at 3 o'clock. The arena was packed with approximately 8,000 fans, and the demographic breakdown was stark. Probably 75% Mexican and Mexican-American fans wearing Marquez colors and waving Mexican flags, 20% Filipino and Filipino-American fans waving Philippine flags, and 5% neutral boxing fans. When Marquez stepped onto the scale first, weighing in at exactly 144 pounds, the arena erupted with cheers, chants, and an ocean of Mexican flags waving. Juan Manuel looked lean, fit, and supremely confident. He flexed for the cameras, beat his chest with his fists, and shouted to the crowd in Spanish, "Mañana victoria!" Tomorrow victory. The crowd roared their approval. Then it was Manny's turn. He removed his shirt and shorts, standing in just his boxing trunks, revealing a physique that was ripped and fight-ready at 144 pounds exactly, the same weight as Marquez. As he stepped onto the scale, the booing was deafening, louder even than the cheers for Marquez had been. But this time, Manny didn't smile politely or wave. He stood on the scale, stared directly at Marquez with an intensity that was unusual for the normally jovial Pacquiao, and after the weight was announced, he stepped down and walked directly toward Marquez for the traditional face-off. The face-off was tense. Manny and Juan Manuel stood nose to nose, staring into each other's eyes, neither breaking eye contact, neither stepping back. The energy was electric, the crowd was going wild, and for several seconds it looked like they might actually start fighting right there on stage before officials stepped in and separated them. As they were pulled apart, Manny said something to Marquez in English that the microphones barely picked up. Tomorrow, no more talking. Tomorrow, we settle everything. After the weigh-in, back in his hotel suite, Manny had dinner with his team, and then spent time in prayer and meditation, his usual routine before major fights. He read passages from his Bible, specifically focusing on verses about strength in adversity, about facing enemies with courage, about trusting in God's plan regardless of circumstances. He prayed not just for victory, but for safety for both himself and Marquez, and for the wisdom to handle whatever outcome occurred with grace. That night he slept better than he had all week in Mexico. Perhaps it was relief to be out of that hostile environment. Perhaps it was the comfort of familiar fight week routine. Or perhaps it was the clarity that comes when preparation is complete, and there's nothing left to do except execute. Whatever the reason, Manny woke up on fight day, Saturday, March 20th, 2012, feeling refreshed, focused, and ready. The hours before the fight passed in a familiar rhythm. Light breakfast, hydration, final review of game plan with Freddie, hand-wrapping by the commission official and Buboy, warm-up routine in the dressing room as the undercard fights proceeded in the arena. And then, finally, it was time. Time to walk to the ring. Time to face Juan Manuel Marquez for the third time. Time to answer all the disrespect, all the hostility, all the doubters with the only answer that truly mattered: performance. The walk to the ring was surreal. As Manny and his team made their way through the backstage area and entered the arena corridor, the sound hit them like a physical force. The crowd of 16,000 was almost entirely hostile, booing so loudly that it drowned out Manny's entrance music. Mexican flags were everywhere, creating a sea of red, white, and green. The Philippine flags carried by Filipino fans were vastly outnumbered and barely visible. It was like entering enemy territory, stepping into a lion's den, walking into the heart of an army that wanted nothing more than to see you destroyed. But Manny's face showed no fear, no hesitation, no doubt. He walked with purpose, his team surrounding him. Freddie Roach in front, Buboy beside him, Alex Ariza behind. He climbed the steps, ducked through the ropes, and stood in his corner as the announcements and pre-fight rituals proceeded. Then Juan Manuel Marquez made his entrance, and the arena erupted with cheers so loud that the building literally shook. The contrast in receptions was stark, undeniable, and intentional. The referee, Kenny Bayless, called both fighters to the center of the ring for final instructions. Manny and Juan Manuel stood face to face one last time, and in that moment, all the external noise faded away. It was just two warriors, two champions, two men who had dedicated their lives to this sport, about to engage in battle for the third time. Bayless finished his instructions. Both fighters touched gloves and returned to their corners. The bell rang, and the fight that would become an instant classic began. Round 1. Manny came out with aggressive energy, immediately pressing forward, throwing combinations, establishing his speed advantage. Marquez, as always, was technically perfect, moving laterally, counter-punching, making Manny miss and pay for it. The round was competitive. Both landed good shots, and when the bell rang, it could have gone either way on the scorecards. The Mexican crowd roared approval for Marquez, booed whenever Manny landed anything significant. Round 2. Manny increased the pressure, working the body, throwing more volume, starting to land his left straight with more frequency. Marquez remained composed, but Manny's speed was causing problems, making it difficult for Juan Manuel to time his counters perfectly. At the end of the round, Manny had landed more punches, been more active, and appeared to win the round more clearly. The Filipino section of the crowd cheered, but they were drowned out by the continued booing from Mexican fans who refused to acknowledge any success from Pacquiao. Rounds 3 through 6 followed a similar pattern. Manny was the aggressor, throwing more punches, landing more frequently, but Marquez was landing the cleaner, harder single shots, particularly straight rights that snapped Manny's head back and showed that Juan Manuel still had the power and timing to hurt him. The scorecards were likely close, probably leaning slightly toward Manny on volume and aggression, but not by a wide margin. It was a competitive, technical boxing match between two all-time greats operating at the highest level. In the corner between rounds, Freddie Roach was giving clear instructions. More body shots, make him drop his hands. Then go upstairs. You're faster than him. Use your speed. Don't get careless and walk into his right hand. Box smart. Manny nodded, breathing steadily, focused and calm. In Marquez's corner, his trainer, Nacho Beristain, was giving similar strategic advice. Wait for him. Let him come. When he gets aggressive, counter him. Your right hand is there. Be patient. You're landing the better shots. Keep doing what you're doing. Round 7 was a turning point. Manny came out with renewed aggression, throwing combination after combination, backing Marquez up for the first time in the fight, landing a particularly hard left straight, followed by a right hook that made Juan Manuel stumble slightly. The crowd's booing intensified, as if their volume could somehow help their fighter withstand the assault. But Manny smelled blood and poured it on, landing another flurry that had Marquez against the ropes covering up. The round was clearly Manny's, his best round of the fight so far. But champions don't break easily, and Juan Manuel Marquez was a champion through and through. In round 8, he came back with determination, landing a beautiful counter right hand that stopped Manny in his tracks and made him respect the Mexican warrior's power once again. The crowd exploded with cheers, sensing their fighter had weathered the storm and was still dangerous. Rounds 9 and 10 were back to competitive tactical chess match between two masters. Both had moments, both landed good shots, both showed the heart and skill that had made them legends. The scorecards were likely close, probably with Manny ahead on most cards but not by a huge margin, meaning the championship rounds 11 and 12 could determine the outcome. Round 11. Manny started fast again, knowing he might need a strong finish to secure the decision. He landed several good combinations early, but midway through the round, Marquez landed a perfectly timed counter right hand, a shot that Manny didn't see coming, that caught him clean on the chin and dropped him to one knee. The crowd went absolutely berserk, screaming, jumping, waving flags, thinking this was it, thinking Marquez was about to finish him. But Manny rose quickly at the count of 3, took the mandatory 8 count, nodded to the referee that he was okay, and when action resumed, he actually came forward aggressively, as if to prove the knockdown hadn't hurt him seriously. The heart and resilience on display were incredible. He survived the round, even landing a few good shots in the final 30 seconds to show he was still in the fight. But there was no question that round belonged to Marquez, and the knockdown likely secured him a 10-8 round, meaning Manny probably needed to win round 12 convincingly to retain his chances of winning the fight on the scorecards. Between rounds 11 and 12, the atmosphere in Manny's corner was intense. Freddie Roach was direct. You got dropped. You probably lost that round 10-8. This fight might be even on the cards right now. You need to win this last round. You need to go out there and leave no doubt. But be smart, don't be reckless. He's looking for another big shot. Manny nodded, rinsed his mouth, and prepared for the final 3 minutes that would determine the outcome of this grueling battle. Round 12. The final round. 3 minutes to settle a rivalry. 3 minutes to answer all the disrespect. 3 minutes to prove who was the better fighter. The bell rang, and both men met in the center of the ring. Manny came forward with urgency but also caution, knowing he needed to win the round, but couldn't afford to walk into another huge counter. Marquez, sensing he might be ahead, or at worst even on the cards, was content to counter and land the bigger shots rather than engage in an all-out brawl. The first minute was competitive, both landing, both moving, both fighting with intelligence and heart. Then, with about a minute 45 left in the round, Manny landed a beautiful left straight that backed Marquez up, followed by a combination to the body and head that clearly hurt the Mexican legend. Manny sensed the moment and unleashed a sustained assault, throwing combination after combination, landing more than he missed, driving Marquez back toward the ropes. The crowd's mood shifted from triumphant to anxious. They were watching their hero get beaten up, watching the Filipino fighter they had booed and insulted all week, dominating the final crucial round. Marquez was tough, weathering the storm, trying to counter, but Manny's volume and aggression were overwhelming. With 30 seconds left, Manny landed another hard combination, and Marquez's legs looked shaky for the first time all night. The final bell rang. Both fighters raised their arms. Both believed they had won. Manny walked to his corner confident he had done enough, especially with that dominant 12th round. Marquez walked to his corner believing his knockdown in round 11 and the cleaner single power shots throughout the fight had secured him the victory. The crowd was on their feet, The atmosphere was electric, and everyone in that arena knew they had just witnessed a classic. The judges' scorecards were collected. Ring announcer Michael Buffer took the microphone. The arena fell to anxious silence. Buffer began, "Ladies and gentlemen, after 12 rounds, we go to the judges' scorecards." The tension was unbearable. Judge Tom Miller scores the bout 114-113. Pause for effect. For the winner, Manny Pacquiao. The Filipino section erupted in cheers, but they were immediately drowned out by booing from the Mexican fans. Judge John McKay scores the bout 115-112. Another pause. For the winner, Manny Pacquiao. More cheers from Filipinos, even louder booing from Mexicans. But now the math was clear. Even if the third judge scored it for Marquez, Manny had won on 2 of 3 cards and would get the majority decision. Judge Ignacio Rodriguez scores the bout 116-111. Final pause. For the winner, by majority decision, Manny Pacman Pacquiao. The announcement confirmed what was already clear. Manny had won. He had answered all the critics, silenced all the doubters, survived the knockdown, and fought his way to victory in one of the most hostile environments any boxer had ever faced. His team rushed into the ring, lifting him up, celebrating. The Philippine flag was raised, and while Mexican fans booed and some even threw their drinks toward the ring in anger, none of it mattered anymore. The result was official. The record books would show that Manny Pacquiao defeated Juan Manuel Marquez for the 3rd time in 3 attempts. In the immediate post-fight interview in the ring with HBO's Larry Merchant, Manny was gracious in victory. "Juan Manuel is a great fighter, a great champion. We gave the fans a great fight tonight. I respect him very much. This week was difficult for me, a lot of hostility, a lot of negative energy, but I stayed focused. I had faith in God. I had faith in my training, and I proved that I belong here, that I deserve respect. Thank you to all the Filipino fans who supported me, and thank you to the Mexican fans also for their passion for boxing, even if they didn't support me personally." Juan Manuel Marquez, in his post-fight interview, was bitter and defiant. "I won that fight. Everyone knows I won. The judges gave it to him again. This is 3 times now. I'm tired of being robbed. I want a 4th fight. I demand a 4th fight. And next time, I won't leave it to the judges." The crowd cheered his defiance, but the reality remained. He had lost on the scorecards, and while he could argue he deserved better scores, the decision was final. In the post-fight press conference an hour later, after both fighters had been checked by doctors and cleaned up, the questions focused heavily on the controversial scorecards and the hostile atmosphere all week. A Mexican journalist asked confrontationally, "Manny, many people, including myself, believe you were once again given a gift by the judges. Do you really believe you clearly won this fight?" Manny responded with more edge than usual. "I landed more punches. I won more rounds. Yes, he dropped me in the 11th. That was a great punch. I give him credit. But one knockdown doesn't win a 12-round fight. I came back strong in the 12th round and dominated him. The judges saw what happened and they scored it fairly. If people want to keep saying I get gifts, that's their problem, not mine." Another question came. "Manny, how did the hostile week in Mexico affect you? Do you feel that the Mexican fans crossed a line in how they treated you?" This question prompted a longer, more emotional response from Manny. "Honestly, it was the hardest week of my career mentally and emotionally. Not because of the training, not because of the opponent, but because of how I was treated. I came to Mexico to show respect, to train at a famous gym, to honor Mexican boxing culture. Instead, I was spit on, had things thrown at me, was called terrible names, was treated like I wasn't human. It hurt me. But I also understand passion and loyalty. Mexican fans love their fighters and I respect that. I just hope that after tonight they can respect me too. Not because I'm Mexican, but because I'm a fighter who gave everything in that ring." The response was heartfelt and vulnerable, showing a side of Manny that people didn't often see. Several journalists, even some Mexican ones, nodded appreciatively. The hostility he faced had been excessive, and his ability to perform at a championship level despite that hostility was worthy of respect regardless of national loyalties. In the days and weeks after the fight, the narrative began to shift. Initial Mexican fan reaction was anger and claims of robbery, but as more neutral observers rewatched the fight and scored it independently, A consensus emerged that while it was a close fight, Pacquiao winning was a reasonable and defensible outcome. Yes, Marquez landed the harder single shots and scored the knockdown, but Manny had the higher work rate, landed more total punches, and won the 12th round decisively, which likely secured him the decision. Even some prominent Mexican boxing analysts and former fighters came out and admitted that while they had rooted for Marquez and personally felt he had done enough to win, they couldn't definitively say the decision was robbery. Marco Antonio Barrera, a Mexican legend and Hall of Fame fighter, said in an interview, "It was an extremely close fight. I scored it for Juan Manuel by 1 round, but I completely understand the judges scoring it for Pacquiao. It was that close. And I have to give credit to Manny for handling the disgusting treatment he received all week with class and dignity. The way some of our fans treated him was shameful, and I apologize on behalf of Mexican boxing fans who crossed the line." The apology from Barrera and several other Mexican boxing figures helped heal some of the wounds from that week. And over time, even hardcore Marquez fans, while never fully accepting the decision, at least developed grudging respect for Manny and acknowledged that the fight was competitive enough that a reasonable argument could be made for either fighter winning. The rivalry between Pacquiao and Marquez would ultimately extend to a 4th fight in December 2012, 9 months after this third encounter. That 4th fight would end dramatically, with Marquez knocking Manny out cold in the 6th round, a devastating knockout that finally gave Juan Manuel the undisputed victory he had craved for so long. Mexican fans celebrated that knockout as validation of everything they had believed. But even with that 4th fight outcome, boxing historians and analysts looking at the 4-fight series objectively conclude that Manny won 2 fights clearly. The 2nd and 4th were clear outcomes, and the 1st and 3rd were so close they could have gone either way. But beyond the specific rivalry with Marquez, the Mexico City humiliation episode became a defining moment in Manny Pacquiao's legacy. It showed that he wasn't just a talented fighter, but a fighter with extraordinary mental toughness, the ability to perform under the most hostile and adverse conditions imaginable. How many champions in boxing history could have endured what he endured that week and still come out and fought at that level? Very few, if any. The incident also sparked important conversations about nationalism and sportsmanship in boxing. Is intense support for your country's fighters acceptable? Absolutely. Is passionate fandom normal? Of course. But where's the line between passionate support and abusive hostility? Where's the line between loving your fighter and disrespecting their opponent as a human being? These questions were debated extensively in boxing media, and while no perfect answers emerged, the Pacquiao-Mexico City incident became a cautionary tale about what happens when nationalism crosses into xenophobia and hatred. For Filipino fans globally, the incident and Manny's response to it became a source of immense pride. Filipinos have often felt disrespected or looked down upon in international contexts, facing discrimination, stereotypes, and condescension. Seeing Manny face all of that and respond by winning in the ring felt like a collective validation, a statement that Filipinos won't be intimidated, won't accept disrespect, and will stand tall regardless of the opposition. Looking back at this incident 12 years later in 2024, both Manny Pacquiao and Juan Manuel Marquez have retired from boxing and have developed a mutual respect and even friendship. They've appeared together at boxing events, they've praised each other in interviews, and they've acknowledged that their 4-fight rivalry, despite all the controversies and hostilities, ultimately elevated both of their legacies and gave fans some of the best boxing matches of the 21st century. In a 2023 interview, Manny reflected on the Mexico City experience. At the time it was so painful, so difficult. I felt hated. I felt disrespected. But looking back now, I'm grateful for that experience. It tested me in ways that no fight ever tested me. It forced me to dig deeper, to find strength I didn't know I had. And it proved to me that external circumstances, no matter how negative, can't break you if you have faith, focus, and determination. That week in Mexico made me a better fighter, a better person, and gave me a story I'll tell my grandchildren someday about overcoming hatred with performance, about answering insults with excellence. Juan Manuel Marquez, in that same interview when asked about the hostile treatment Manny received, expressed some regret. I didn't personally organize or encourage the worst behavior from fans, but I also didn't speak up against it at the time, and in retrospect, I should have. Manny didn't deserve to be spit on, to have things thrown at him, to be called terrible names. He came to fight me honorably, and he should have been treated with basic human respect. I was so focused on winning, so wrapped up in my own feelings about the previous decisions, that I didn't step back and say, this is wrong. If I could go back, I would publicly ask fans to show respect, to support me intensely, but not to abuse my opponent. That's my only regret from that rivalry. The story of Manny Pacquiao being humiliated in Mexico, and then shocking the world by winning anyway, is ultimately a story about the triumph of character over circumstances, about resilience in the face of hatred, about proving doubters wrong not through words but through actions. It's a story that transcends boxing and sports, offering lessons applicable to anyone facing hostility, discrimination, or overwhelming opposition in any aspect of life. When you're the outsider, the unwelcome presence, the person everyone wants to see fail, you have two choices. You can internalize that negativity and let it destroy your confidence and performance, or you can transform it into fuel, motivation, determination to prove everyone wrong. Manny chose the latter, and in doing so, he added one of the most impressive victories of his career, not because of the technical boxing performance alone, but because of the mental and emotional strength required to achieve it under those circumstances. This is the story of how Manny Pacquiao was humiliated when he arrived in Mexico to fight Juan Dinamita Marquez, facing hostility unlike anything seen in modern boxing, enduring a week of psychological warfare and abuse, getting knocked down in the fight itself, but ultimately rising, fighting back, and winning on the scorecards to shock the world and silence his critics through the only language that truly matters in boxing: performance in the ring. Remember this story not just as boxing history, but as a lesson in resilience, in maintaining dignity when facing hatred, in focusing on what you can control rather than what you can't, and in proving your worth through excellence rather than through retaliation or bitterness. That's championship mentality. That's what separates legends from ordinary fighters. And that's why Manny Pacquiao will always be remembered not just for his 8-division world championships, not just for his exciting fighting style, but for his character, his grace under pressure, and his ability to rise above hatred and adversity to achieve greatness.